Hello, this is Jeremy Giles, and you're listening to episode 66 of Who's on Top.
And welcome back to episode 66 of Who's on Top. And unlike the previous 65, we got a new host. Ori Ben Ari is off at college, and I put myself.
No, he's not off at college. He's out
not off
at
at college.
camp.
He's
Not
off
in
at
college.
camp. Same thing. And I put myself in charge. And even though Ori's not the host, nothing's changed in terms of Jacob interrupting. And it's the first bro. How you doing, buddy?
What's up? Let's talk some sports. And that wasn't interrupting at all. I was just correcting you.
Okay, well, correcting, interrupting, yin yang. Sitting in his basement.
Red Sox, cheaters, yin yang.
Sitting in his basement with an uncut hair, it's the Russian machine, Ellis Gordon.
What's up, guys?
And finally, back from DC, growing. Why am I talking about hair? Anyway, it's the fencing captain, Jeremy Giles.
Hello, yes, as always, at your service.
And of course, I'm going to introduce myself, which Ori never seems to do. I'm Daniel Fox. But let's transition back to basketball. And long-time listeners may remember we did NFL obituaries back in January for the following teams. And now I'm going to do some more for the 4 teams that got eliminated in the NBA last week. First up, we'll go with the number 1 seed out west, the Utah Jazz. All year, people didn't believe the Jazz, even though they're the number 1 seed, Ellis. The Jazz were the number 1 seed all year long, but no one really believed in them, and it turns out that was for good reason, as they lose to the semis to an undermanned Clippers team, right? They lost to the Clippers?
Yeah.
Yeah, to an undermanned Clippers team. So that leaves you wondering, the Jazz, the number 1 seed, how much better can they get? Jacob, where do they go from here?
Yeah, to answer the question, I think the Jazz can get a lot better, to be honest, in my opinion. As we know, the Jazz were up 2-0. Donovan Mitchell was playing like he was one of the best players in the NBA. But I think I'm not going to say the main reason for losing this game, for losing this series. I'm going to say it's Rudy Gobert. Clippers players shot 80% from the field when Gobert was guarding them as the primary defender in Game 7 or in Game 6. Game 6, I think. But yeah, obviously we know Gobert, Defensive Player of the Year, Jordan Clark, not most improved, 6th Man of the Year. And Gobert's his minutes this series were not very high at all. And when the Jazz don't play Gobert, they do not do well. Don't really know why Gobert didn't get the minutes, but for some reason he didn't. Another thing for the Jazz that definitely contributed to the loss was not having Mike Conley for the first 5 games of the series. Conley averaged 16 points and 6 assists per game in the regular season, and is one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. Having him not being there was really detrimental to the Jazz's offense because they made the most 3-pointers in the NBA this year. And to not have their best shooter is really rough for them. He had a strained hamstring. But I think this Jazz team next year, they come back super strong. They don't really do too much in the offseason. Re-sign their guys that have player options. They're not losing anyone too major. And I was going to give a shout out to Donovan Mitchell, just proving himself and cementing himself as a top player in the league. But I just think it's ridiculous that the Clippers did this. I'm going to give some credit to Paul George, too, all without Kawhi Leonard coming back down 2-0. But, it should be an exciting rest of the NBA season, and the Jazz will be back super strong next year, I think.
I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick. I just want to say real quick that I think also Donovan Mitchell's late game injuries hampered him a lot. But other than that, I think if Donovan Mitchell continues to progress, this Jazz team could be as good. Donovan Mitchell's great. There's no doubting it, but he can get even better. And I think his progression as a defender and just an all-around star will determine where this Jazz team goes in the future.
I agree with you in the future. I guess I'm actually a bit more critical on this year. Like, to me, this is this is a series you cannot lose. You're up 2-0 to the Clippers. They lose their best star, their 100% best player, Kawhi Leonard. And I know Paul George is good, but I don't really think it's that close. You can't lose that series. Like, I don't know. I feel like this entire year, like Jazz fans and it's always been this narrative like don't necessarily doubt the Jazz, don't doubt the Jazz when everyone was doubting them. And I mean, this is why, right? They lose to a Clippers team without their best star that they have a better record than, should 100% be better than. I'm not saying that the Mike Conley injury didn't affect and they didn't have injuries, but none of that is close to losing your star player for the entire series. And I don't know. I feel like if you can't beat this Clippers team without like adjusting your team, I just don't know if I have too much faith in how far you can go.
Let's move on to the Brooklyn Nets, who you might remember very early on. I'm not one, I'm not one to talk about my own successes and wins, but I did say that the Nets weren't going to even make the finals. And here we are. I'm still right. I mean,
but when the playoffs came around, Daniel, what did you predict the Nets were going? When the actual playoffs came, where did you say the Nets would go? Because if I remember, you said they'd make the finals.
Yeah, but my first instinct is always right. That's
no.
That's
the
what
other
they
thing
me
is,
down on.
Dan, your first instinct was right, but it was right for the wrong reasons.
Why?
Well, they didn't have James Harden at the time.
Well, because
we'll get into that. So why was I right?
The other thing I'll say, your you were right that they lost in the second round. Your reasoning was wrong because your reasoning was because of the chemistry. The chemistry wasn't the problem. The problem was the injuries.
Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about why I was right. Look, obviously James Harden was limited the whole series. He missed the first 4 games, and then the last 3 games he was.
And no Kyrie for a lot of the series.
And Kyrie missed the last 3 games. So it was all on Kevin Durant, who almost miraculously pulled them back. And Ellis was like the role players to step up, but Go Harris. So if you're the Nets next year, I mean, I think they're still the most talented team in basketball. I think things just didn't go their way in terms of injuries and luck. Kevin Durant has 2 sizes smaller of a shoe. They're going to the Eastern Conference Finals. So just little things like that. I mean, they lost in Game 7 in overtime, even with the 2 injuries. So I say they just run it back next year, and they got to be the favorites in the East. But they are getting up there in age. Kyrie Irving all these guys have dealt with, persistent injuries. And you can't be happy to see that Durant's going to, if you're a Nets fan, play in the Olympics.